Polymarket says there's over 50% likelihood that the US will strike Iran by June. Do you expect another round to the 12-day war?
There's going to be another strike. Even Scott Bessent pretty much admitted that they tanked the currency and that they got the people out onto the streets. It was orchestrated. It's always been about regime change. It's going to be a question of once the US and Israel strike, can Iran last? The fear is that other countries now are going to start to look at nuclear weapons. It's a very dangerous situation.
That's a very scary world. Let's start with, I think, the what I consider the most important development. You might disagree, is Macron saying about other European leaders should meet Putin. That would have been unheard of just a year ago under the Biden administration. How significant is this, and why do you think that's shifting?
It's significant, and it's also not significant. It's important that you have European leaders now, especially Macron, who is saying that it's time to speak to Putin. France actually sent an envoy to Moscow a couple of days ago. If Macron was serious about diplomacy with Russia and with Putin, he would pick up the phone and call Putin. You know, what's stopping him? Lavrov said the same thing. So, I mean, they're testing the waters. I think the Europeans are understanding that, well, a couple of things, that the Trump administration is at the negotiating table and they're left out. Notice that during the Abu Dhabi negotiations, no one even talked about the Europeans or mentioned the Europeans. So, I mean, they've been completely cut out of the negotiations. I think the Europeans are still very worried that the United States is moving away from Europe and placing more of an emphasis on Asia and China. So they're worried about that as well. And there are some people in Europe that do understand that Ukraine has lost and that Russia is winning. And they understand that Russia's economy is not going to fall apart and crumble, that the Russian military is not going to fall apart and crumble, and that Ukraine is in a terrible mess. The energy infrastructure is near collapse. The economy is near collapse. Europe is going to have to give them another 90 billion, of which they're going to have to go out and raise the money. So the EU is going to take on debt. I don't know what investor is crazy enough to give the EU money so that they can give it to Ukraine when you know that money's going to disappear. All around, it's a bad situation. And the EU member states are also going through a terrible time. Their individual economies are not doing well either. France is crumbling. Germany is deindustrializing. Outside of the EU, you look at what's going on in the UK. And Starmer is being brought down by the whole Epstein scandal, but that's been a culmination, a progression of Starmer's policies and his support for Ukraine, while ignoring the people of Britain. So the Mandelson thing is just kind of the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Starmer's problems. But all in all, it's a very bad situation for Europe and the European elites.
And even for the US, because you mentioned Epstein, they're dealing with the repercussions, and there's the hearings and everything else that's coming out with the Epstein files, and it's going a lot deeper than anyone expected. So I'm not sure how that's going to impact their policy when it comes to Ukraine, China, Iran, whether that's going to distract people and allow them more leeway to do what they want, or the opposite, it distracts them enough that they start paying less attention to what's happening in Ukraine, caring less about what Ukraine gets in those peace negotiations, what Europe wants, and just trying to finalize it to kind of move on or move attention away from the Epstein files. Just on Macron's envoy that visited Putin. So Macron said his conclusion from this was, what did I gain? Confirmation that Russia does not want peace right now. So does that essentially say, is that why you said it's not really that exciting, because it didn't lead anywhere?
Well, Europe doesn't want peace. I mean, that's the, when they say, when Macron comes out with a statement and says that Russia doesn't want peace. No, Russia has put its terms on the table. They've been out there for about a year and a half now. I think those terms have changed, given the fact that that Russia is very close to capturing the Donbass. And while that was in the terms in 2024, it's not going to play much of a role going forward in any new terms that are going to be brought up. The need for the Ukraine military to leave Donetsk is not really much of a need anymore, not much of a demand anymore, because Russia knows they're going to take Donetsk sooner or later. Macron is saying that Europe is not ready for peace when he says statements like that. Putin's terms are there. Everyone knows Russia's terms. These aren't secret. Just because the media doesn't talk about it, just because the media never mentions it, doesn't mean they don't exist. And actually, Lavrov said that in Alaska, in Anchorage, the United States also put forward a plan, which was very similar to, from what we understand, because we don't have the details of it, but our understanding is that it was fairly close to June 2024, with some concessions that Russia would have to make. But Putin agreed with it. The United States since then walked everything back. But there are terms on the table to get to a peace. But the Europeans, and most importantly, Zelensky, they don't want to accept the Russian terms.
Lavrov showed frustration as well in his interview. He referenced the terms in Alaska, and he was frustrated that the US walked away from these terms, that Trump has walked back a lot of the progress that many were hopeful about early on, and that people around, correct me if I get anything wrong, but from what I understand, people around Putin, according to Lavrov, are getting a bit frustrated by Putin's diplomacy and trusting Trump in these negotiations. Can you tell me more about that interview? Because he seemed more frustrated and more overt than he usually is.
Yeah, well, notice in the talks, the foreign ministry is not in any of these talks either in Abu Dhabi, so they haven't been present either. The Russian foreign ministry, which is very odd. On the flip side, neither has the State Department in the U.S. either. So I mean, you kind of have these envoys in Witkoff and Kushner with Russian officials, but these officials that are representing Russia are on the intelligence side, on the military intelligence, and they're speaking more from a standpoint of security than overall umbrella diplomacy, which is something that Lavrov will be able to address. So these have been very, very unorthodox negotiations that have been taking place. But look, I think Lavrov is critiquing Putin, and he's expressing frustration in the process, because what we have seen over the past 3 to 4 months as we've been going through this process is we've seen the United States put an offer on the table. The US put the offer, then they walked it back. So it's very odd that you put an offer out there and then you walk back that offer. So we had that happen. Then we had the Trump administration decide to escalate with sanctions, talk about providing Tomahawk missiles, which he did not do, still provide intelligence sharing and all the targeting and satellite information to Ukraine, continue to provide Ukraine with the support to go after Russia's energy infrastructure. That's all the United States as well. And then you had the big one, which two really big incidences, which I think are frustrating Russia with diplomacy with the United States, which is the going after Putin in Valdai, his residence in Valdai. And you had the recent assassination attempt against the Russian general, who is part of the negotiating team.
It was a day after the negotiations as well.
Yeah, a day after the negotiations. And the chief negotiator is this man's boss, Alexeyev. This is his boss in Abu Dhabi. But it has also been revealed that this general has taken part in the negotiations. So he was part of the negotiations team. And you have this assassination attempt a day after the negotiations, at least I think it was the second or the third round of negotiations wrap up. So people are upset and they're getting frustrated. And you know, this is a tactic that the Trump administration has been using. I don't like to say it. I don't like to talk about it. It's frustrating to think that the United States is doing these things. But when you look at all the negotiations that have been taking place, whether it be with Iran, whether it be with Hamas, whether it be with Russia, there's this decapitation effort that the United States tries to pull off as they're negotiating, it's not a good look. They're in negotiations, and negotiations end, and you have some sort of strike or some sort of operation that takes place. This is not helping the U.S. And I think a lot of countries are looking at this and they're saying, what the F is going on here? What is wrong with the Trump administration?
Also, one thing Lavrov talked about in his interviews, the way the US is conducting itself on the world stage. He talks about the US and the collective West, essentially seeking global dominance by controlling trade, the world economy through aggressive and unfair means. I think he's referring to what happened in Venezuela, and the pressure that's been placed on India. Now, India's imports of Russian oil dropped from 2.5 mid last year to about 1.2. It's hard to confirm these numbers. But it's dropped significantly since mid last year. Is that hurting the Russian economy? And do you expect that slowdown to continue? Because Trump said that India agreed in the latest trade deal. India agreed to cut Russian imports, oil imports, and that the US is going to monitor that and reimpose tariffs if they continue buying Russian oil. But India did not confirm that. So what do we know? Is India still buying Russian oil, the same quantities as before, or has it reduced them, and has Russia been able to find another buyer?
I mean, we don't know, but I don't think this is going to hurt the Russian economy. I'm very, very confident this is not going to hurt the Russian economy. I'm very confident that whatever deal has been worked out with the Russian oil, with India and with China, something has been worked out. Maybe India will decrease the purchasing of the Russian oil. Maybe China has agreed to ramp up the purchasing of Russian oil. Perhaps India has their three big refiners not purchasing Russian oil at the levels that they were purchasing the oil, and they have other refineries purchasing that oil, and they're not talking about it. The fact that Modi did not mention that they're going to be cutting down on the purchasing of Russian oil, I think says a lot. Trump has been saying this for a year now. India is going to ditch Russian oil. It hasn't happened. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm pretty confident it's not going to happen. Maybe things will lessen with India purchasing the Russian oil, because perhaps India for the next couple of months wants to give the impression that they don't want anything to derail the trade agreement that they have with the United States. But I'm confident that something has been worked out by the BRICS members.
And the last development as well is the expiry of the STRAT treaty. Now, Trump has always said he wants to negotiate a new treaty that includes China. China's the one that's building their nuclear capacity the fastest right now, trying to catch up to Russia and the US. It will take them many years to get there, but they are moving pretty quickly. And Trump said that he would like a new treaty to include China, which sounds very fair. But Putin proposed extending the STRAT treaty, which is a nuclear arms control agreement between the two countries that was signed under Obama, I think, to extend it by a year. And Trump initially, from memory, he was open to that, but now we found out that he changed his mind and the treaty has expired. And does that mean much? Could we see a new arms race between the two countries, or will they pretty quickly negotiate a new treaty that will include China? Because things are tense between the three countries now. I don't see how they could negotiate a new treaty under these circumstances. And China has no real incentive to sign because their nuclear capacity, their arsenal is not that big yet. So they do need more years to catch up to Russia and the US before signing a treaty that limits their capacity.
Yeah, Lavrov said that we should not look too much into this. I mean, he kind of put a positive, a reassuring spin to it, because he said that all of the sides are monitoring one another. But it doesn't change the fact that that nothing's in place when it comes to nuclear proliferation. This was the last of the treaties, if I'm not mistaken. That's it.
And I think there's one more, but that doesn't apply to Russia. I think there's one more non-proliferation.
Well, you have the nuclear non-proliferation, yeah, the
exactly,
general umbrella one, yeah. But between the superpowers, the nuclear superpowers, we don't have anything in place anymore. And the part that worries me is that Trump did the same thing with the JCPOA. You know, he even said the same exact words when it came to renegotiating this New START treaty. He said it was a bad treaty. I didn't like it. I want to renegotiate it. He said the same thing about the JCPOA, and look where that got us. And there was no reason for him to walk away from the JCPOA. He could have kept the JCPOA in place while negotiating something new. while discussing something with Iran and the Europeans who were signatories, part of the JCPOA. Everyone agreed to the JCPOA. The Security Council agreed to the JCPOA. There was no reason for Trump to walk away from it. He's doing the same thing with the New START treaty. There was nothing stopping Trump from extending it for one more year. What was the problem? Extend it for 1 year, speak with China, speak with Russia, try to figure things out. Instead, he just let it run out. And even the Russians said that they were getting no response from the United States. The fear is that other countries now are going to start to look at nuclear weapons. You already have Germany, Poland, Sweden, Saudi
Even
Arabia,
rumblings in Japan. Rumblings in Japan as well.
Exactly, Japan. It's a very
That's a
dangerous
scary world.
situation.
That's a very
It's
scary
a very
world.
scary world. Yeah. And Trump is saying, I want to renegotiate it, and I'm the great negotiator, and it was a bad treaty. Well, fine, you may think that, but it was a treaty. And it was holding things together, barely holding things together, but it was holding some things together. And he could have easily extended it. There was no problem to just extend it for 1 year. Why he didn't do it, I have no idea what's going on. I don't understand why he didn't extend it. It doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe he's playing hardball. He thinks he has some leverage. He doesn't have any leverage over China and Russia. Together, China and Russia are much more powerful than the United States, especially when it comes to nuclear weapons, especially when it comes to nuclear weapon technology. The US doesn't even have a hypersonic missile. They have a discombobulator, whatever the hell that is, right? But they don't have hypersonics. They don't have Poseidons. They don't have Budovesniks. They don't have Orezhniks. They don't have any of these things. He should have extended the thing. That's what he should have done. It was easy. That was an own goal by Trump. He messed that one up.
I want to go to another country that's seeking a nuclear weapon, or allegedly seeking a nuclear weapon. That's Iran. Now, Iran is seeking it as a deterrent. You could look at countries that did not seek a nuclear weapon. Libya's one of the examples, and what happened to them. Gaddafi's dead. Some people use Ukraine as an example, giving up their weapons in the 90s to Russia in return for security guarantees. Didn't end up well for them. So Iran's looking at those two examples and comparing them to North Korea, which has nuclear weapons, and probably the worst regime out there right now. And yet no one is pressuring North Korea at all, let alone maybe a few sanctions. That's about it compared to Iran. Yet we see in Iran the protests that almost took down the regime. We saw a few fires today. We saw a few others in the last few days. That could be the work of Mossad. And we've got threats from the US, strikes that people thought they were imminent. Then there's been reports that the Gulf countries and Israel convinced Trump not to proceed with the strikes. I think that was late January when the protests were at their peak. And now we've got negotiations with a pretty big armada that's in the near the Iranian coast. There's reports that Netanyahu, who's en route to meet Trump, that's never a good sign for U.S. foreign policy, at least in my opinion. And there's been reports, according to Channel 14, that Netanyahu is seeking not only Iran's nuclear program, which has always been America's main focus, but they want a complete cancellation of the nuclear program. They want zero uranium enrichment on Iranian soil, even for civilian use, zero uranium enrichment capabilities, removal of all enriched uranium from Iran. So all these about, directly or indirectly, or directly related to their nuclear program. Number 5, limiting the range of Iranian missiles to 300 kilometers. Now, I don't see how that's feasible under any circumstances. Iran could accept this, especially considering how they were just in a war mid last year. So they need the ability to defend themselves. And number 6, dismantling of the proxies, Iranian proxies, where they've all been significantly weakened, almost dismantled. And lastly, intense real and qualitative supervision over Iran. So that's apparently, allegedly, what Netanyahu is going to be seeking from Trump. And yeah, Polymarket says there's over 50% likelihood that the US will strike Iran by June. Where do you guys stand on this, on the Duran?
Well, demands that are meant to be rejected by Iran. These demands are obviously going to be rejected by any country. And then they've moved the goalpost. Now it's about ballistic missiles, right? Now they have to get rid of their ballistic missiles. No country's gonna agree to that. No country would ever agree to something like that. And if Iran were to agree to these demands, well, then Iran would be done. I mean, the regime change would happen. They would be attacked. It would be over. and everyone knows it. So I mean, Iran's not going to fall for this. Their policy has been, we're going to negotiate on the uranium enrichment, and everything else is not up for
There's a red
discussion.
line.
Yeah, they're not even going to address all the other demands. The problem is that Netanyahu is he was going to go to the United States next week. He pushed it up a week earlier because there was a sense that Trump was starting to lean more towards diplomacy. So now Netanyahu is going to go to the United States, and he's going to convince Trump to strike Iran. He'll have a lot of support and a lot of help from the neocons and people like Lindsey Graham. You know, the problem with Trump is that usually his actions, his policies are dependent on the last person that he speaks to. So, you know, if it's Netanyahu and Lindsey Graham that are whispering in Trump's ear and they demand him to take action, and he wakes up the next morning and says, "Okay, I'm going to do it," well, then there's going to be a strike. It's going to be difficult for the United States, for Trump to walk this back, to remove the armada. Same thing with Venezuela. We saw the same exact thing with Venezuela. They move all of these assets in place, these military assets. All of this strike capability is right there. Trump is talking about how this is giving the United States leverage by having all the military power in place, and that way he could get a better deal. But once you put all of that those military assets in the position where they are, you're 50%, if not more, on the way towards some.
Not
sort
only that,
of,
if you add, Alex, you add
militarization.
all the rhetoric during the protests, it makes it very, very difficult. Now, Trump has has a history as a negotiating strategy or a tactic to ramp up the rhetoric, as we saw with Greenland, and then walk it back to something more reasonable. We could see the same thing in Iran, but that's a much trickier situation. There's even an influencer we posted about 2 days ago that made a whole stream begging Trump to strike Iran and then killed himself, committed suicide, Iranian influencer. So when you have a situation like this, when you rile up Iranians to go out there and protest and face the regime, and then they die in the thousands, and then you don't act, it is a very tricky position for Trump. Do you think so? But based on what you said, with that rhetoric, with the military equipment in the region, with Netanyahu heading to meet Trump right now, do you expect another round to the 12-day war?
I expect there's going to be another strike. I don't know in what way they're going to do it. One thing that we've learned from Trump is that he wants to avoid long wars. He's terrified of long conflicts. And during the 12-day war, it was the United States and Israel that had to back off because it was dragging on, and they saw that they were getting weaker. For Trump, it's all about the knockout blow. He wants to get it over in round 1 or 2. We saw that in Venezuela. We saw that he tried to do it with the first conflict with Iran. And we're going to see what military plan they're going to put together to try and get the regime change. It's always been about regime change. It hasn't been about uranium enrichment. It hasn't been about protesters. Even Scott Bessent pretty much admitted that they tanked the currency and that they got the people out onto the streets. It was orchestrated. Everyone knows it was orchestrated. It's always been about regime change. They want to regime change Iran, just like they wanted to regime change Venezuela, just like they wanted to regime change Russia. So they want to regime change Iran now. How they're going to do it, who knows? Who would have called Venezuela that they would have come up with that plan? But obviously, Iran is very different. It's a whole different government.
92 million people. Many ethnic groups that wanted to be separate.
Yeah.
Many separate.
And it's a religious leader as well, Mara. It's very different. You're not removing Maduro, who knows how popular he really was. He was popular. He had his support, but he also had people who did not want him there. But this time around, you are removing, or you're going to try to remove, not only the supreme leader, but also a religious figure. A lot of bad things can happen if they go that route. I think that for me, it's going to be a question of once the U.S. and Israel strike, can Iran last? Can they take it to 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks? Whatever operation is going to unfold, that's the question. If Iran can get through the 1 or 2 week timeline or time frame, once a strike happens, then the U.S. and Israel is in big trouble.
Because they can exhaust their air defense systems for Israel, as we saw in the 12-day war, but also for the bases in the Middle East, U.S. bases.
And Trump doesn't want a long conflict. And the longer it goes, you run that risk of more pressure mounting on Trump to do what? To get more involved, to put boots on the ground, to get the U.S. military more bogged down. And you're coming close to an election as well, the November election, which takes us to Ukraine as well, because one of the reasons that Trump is trying to push for some sort of a deal in Ukraine, any deal, whatever he can get, is because there's an understanding that come summertime, all the focus is going to shift towards the midterms. So there's that understanding as well. By the way, Ukraine never had nuclear weapons. Never.
They didn't have the nuclear weapons, but they didn't have the ability to launch them, correct?
They never had nuclear weapons. Those weapons were the USSR's, and Russia, as a successor state, they took responsibility of those nuclear weapons.
So Russia had the ability to launch them, and then they were present in Ukraine's territory. So it's very different to what we have in North Korea.
They were also present in Belarus. They were also present in Kazakhstan. That was the deal. But by the way, many people say, well, Russia benefited being the successor state to the Soviet Union by taking the nuclear weapons. Yeah, but you know what else Russia did? They took on all the freaking debt. So all the countries that left the Soviet Union, they didn't have any of the debts. Russia had all the debts, and they had to pay everything off. So there was the pros, there was the cons, but it was the right decision because everything was in Moscow, and every party involved when it came to the nuclear weapons issue and the breakup of the Soviet Union, they all agreed that it's in the best interest of the world to have one country that is the successor state of the Soviet Union that's going to safeguard the nuclear weapons.
I don't disagree. The less countries, in my opinion, the less countries, good or bad.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't care what country
Clinton,
it is.
Yeah. Clinton said that's the right way to go. Absolutely. That was the right decision that the Clinton administration made back then.
Last question on Iran is how involved do you think Russia and China will be in this case? We have, if this war, there's just so many moving pieces, because if this war drags on, Russia has Iran as an ally. Iran used to supply a lot of drones to Russia that Russia now manufactures domestically. But also the Strait of Hormuz is a massive oil choke point. If that is closed up or disrupted by Iran, by their submarines, or they've got thousands of mines, sea mines available, including smart mines, if they start to disrupt that choke point, then we have oil prices skyrocket, and that will benefit Russia's coffers. So Russia essentially probably could end up being one of the biggest winners. They have the US extended in Iran, and the longer that war goes on for, the better off Russia is. China's in a trickier position because they do rely on that oil, and that will cost them more to import oil if Iran is struck. Israel is probably the biggest winner, or the second biggest after Russia. Considering all these factors, how involved do you think Russia will be this time around compared to the 12-day war? And what role do you think China will play?
I think they are involved, and they're going to be involved. To what end? It's hard to say. I mean, Iran has not, at least publicly, they haven't put out any statements where they're talking about getting Chinese or Russian help. So Iran hasn't really asked for it. Maybe they have they definitely have the private meetings and the back channels where they are discussing how to deal with the conflict with the United States and Israel, and what level of support they're going to get from China and Russia and the BRICS members. Iran is part of BRICS. We can't forget that they are a part of BRICS now. And so Iran should use their membership in BRICS, at least when it comes to financial economic situations. Iran, all they needed was a couple of billion when Besson tanked the currency, and they would have been okay. But they didn't ask for the money from BRICS, or they didn't ask for the money from China to prop up the economy, to prop up the currency. So Iran has not really been taking advantage of its partners and its BRICS membership. China would have easily lent a couple of billion to Iran when their currency was tanking. So we don't know exactly what's happening behind the scenes. Publicly, there haven't been any statements saying that Iran and China, from either side, that they're going to be involved in this. I imagine they are going to be helping. The longer this drags out, I think you make an excellent point where you say the longer this drags out, the more dangerous it gets. because a lot of other countries can start to come into this conflict. On the
They're
flip side, though,
more beneficial for Russia on the
I don't think
table
anyone
when it comes to
wants
Ukraine.
it. I agree, but I just don't think anyone wants this. I don't think anyone wants this chaos, and I think that's what we're going to get if there's a conflict with Iran, a real full scale conflict. My sense of things is that the Trump administration, if I had to take a guess, my sense of it would be that the Trump administration is going to go for some sort of big, a powerful strike to get the regime changed, because that is what this is all about. So we have to put ourselves in the Trump administration's shoes, as well as Israel. Israel would be fine with a long conflict as long as they had the United States to backstop everything, but the United States can't. They can't do it for many reasons that we discussed just from moments ago. So I think the Trump administration is going to do what they always have been doing, which is to try and figure out a way to get that regime change. I don't know what that plan is. Like I said, no one expected the capturing of Maduro, but obviously that's not what's going to happen. Yeah,
maybe we'll see the use of the discombobulator or what later, whatever.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah,
we'll see. Or we'll have a teleport machine that will teleport special forces.
Yeah, Trump says they have these super duper weapons that no one else has. So I don't know. Maybe we'll see one of these super duper weapons pop up. But they're going to go for a big strike to knock the regime out. If they can't get it, then I think Trump is going to probably get an off ramp. That would be my guess.
But I agree. I'm leaning more to the off ramp. Hopefully that's the case. I hate the regime in Iran more than others, but I don't think a regime change or any military intervention is the solution. And Gulf nations that are rivals to Iran don't want this war to happen. You're talking about the UAE and Saudi. Saudi hates Iran, and they don't want this war to happen.
No one wants it to happen. And you know what the weird part about all of this is? You have a president in Pezeshkian who is very friendly and very open to negotiate with the West and with the Trump administration. That's why he was voted in as president, because he does lean towards good relations with the West. I mean, the guy's a doctor. He's very open to speaking with the West and negotiating with the West, and he wants good relations. I mean, that was his platform pretty much. And so you actually have someone at the other side, on the other side of the table, that you can talk to if you just make the effort to talk to them. But no, it's when you're a hammer, everything's nails.
Alex, always a pleasure. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mario. Always a pleasure to be on.